Today we are going to be going over the 7.0 contract. Now there are a couple different instances where you will use this. If you're in the city of Chicago, really the only time that you'll be required to use this is if the listing agent requires it. So sometimes there are companies that require their agents to use the 7.0. A lot of them are located in the suburbs. So if you have a suburban listing agent listing something in the city, it's possible that they will require the 7.0. And the way that you find it is it's just in templates under your association's documents. So if you go to your association docs under templates and just type in the search bar 7.0, it'll come up. But the other instance would be in the suburbs, okay, because the KO contract, for instance, is for the city of Chicago. So make sure that if you're in the burbs, this is the one that you use. And from there, really, I'm just going to kind of walk us through the entire thing. If you have any questions, feel free to enter them into the chat or unmute yourself, or you can go ahead and enter them on Facebook as well. Thanks for joining me. All right, so the first page here, the parties. Okay, obviously we have our buyer and we have our seller. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. Dual agency will never apply if it's your listing, okay, or if you're representing someone in the transaction. KO Realty does not allow dual agency. So if you get, let's say you have a listing and you do want to represent the other party, you cannot, but you can have them sign a no agency form. And basically at that point, the no agency form is informing them that they will have to, they can use you to go ahead and fill out the contract and answer generic questions, but they shouldn't be asking for advice from you or giving you confidential information, because ultimately the seller is your client, okay? And that way you can get the full commission without being a dual agent. All right, the real estate, we have our lot size or our acreage. Gonna put in the address. Okay, and I'm just filling this out generically so that you can see what I do. Our PIN number is going to be located on the MLS, okay? So under the tax information, that's where you'll find the PIN. And you'll mark here if it's single family or multi-unit, okay? Is parking included? So generally, you don't have to fill this out unless it is a attached property. Okay, if you have a driveway in a single family home, yes, of course, that's included. Same with storage. So single family attached generally is where you're going to see that. All right, because if you own a property, you own everything on the property. Fixtures and personal property at no added value. So here we're going to mark, if we have a refrigerator, you can use an X and mark it. If you have multiple, you can put how many are there, 2, 3, okay, whatever that number is. But we're going to go through this entire list, make sure that we mark anything that is in the property, have your seller go over it to make sure that the buyer marked everything correct, okay? But you're going to go ahead and do that. Other items included at no added value, so that means that they're just leaving it. They're not charging you for it. There's no bill of sale. So let's say that there is a pool table in the basement and you want it, but you don't want to pay for it. You think it should be included. Okay, you can put it there. And the same thing goes for items that you don't want or the items that are not included. So let's say you're going to take the pool table, okay? Pool table and basement is not included. If there's something that is not in operating condition, one of those fixtures, you're going to mark it here. So let's say that the sump pump is broken. Okay, we're going to go ahead and mark it there because it's listed. We have it marked, but it's not working correctly. If a home warranty applies, click here. So generally what I like to do is when I'm working with buyers, I like to use the home warranty as a negotiation tactic. So I don't ask for it right off the bat. All right. Purchase price. So we're going to put a price here. We'll put 450,000. Credit at closing. So if in today's market, right, it's still fairly warm. It's not as hot as it was 6 months ago, but you may run into multiple offers still. So if your client is looking for a credit, it can look negative, especially if there are other offers on the table. Why would someone ask for a credit? So generally what they're looking for, if they're asking for a credit before having an inspection, so these scenarios are closing costs, okay? And generally that would be an FHA loan because that's what they're going to push for. So let's say that they're getting the loan at 350. They want to get a credit of 6%. So they're going to figure out what that is, mark it down, okay? But remember, it can go against you as far as negotiations go. Earnest money, obviously the more earnest money the better as far as an offer goes. It makes the seller feel comfortable, although it's never retained. I shouldn't say never. 99% of the time it's not retained. And the reason that is because there are so many different conditions in a contract that, you know, there's going to be something that comes up, some contingency that will allow the buyer to get their earnest money back. So it's not as important as you would think, but it does show, hey, I've got some money in my pocket. I'm serious about this. Who will be holding the earnest money? So we do not hold it as the seller's. If we're the seller's brokerage, we do not hold it if we're the buyer's brokerage. If the other company holds it, the listing agent's company, you mark seller. If they will not hold it, then you're going to have to figure it out. So as otherwise agreed. So generally that's going to be attorneys or title companies. Closing, we're going to go ahead and put in a closing date. So if today's the 2nd, 30 days is December 2nd. That's generally going to be your minimum. I would recommend talking to your lender and making sure of a reasonable closing date. If you say, I'd like to close Friday, December 3rd, and they say it's not going to happen, let's shoot for the 10th. Okay, we'll do that. You know, it's easier for you just to make that phone call. So that's my suggestion. Financing. So if they are taking a loan, we're going to get all of this information off of their approval letter. If this information is not on the approval letter, call the lender and get this information. But you need to fill this all out, okay? The reason I can't fill it out is because it's always a little bit different. So just make sure that you get those figured out. How much are they putting down, okay? Things of that nature. How many years are they getting the loan for? If it is a transaction with no mortgage, meaning it's cash, you'll go ahead and click there. If it's a cash transaction, but meaning that the buyer shows they have enough cash to do it, but they decide they want to take a loan out just for their own personal reasons. Maybe they want to keep that cash out to use for something else. You're going to allow them to get a mortgage. Okay, so that's what this is. Disclosures, this is just saying if you have or have not received the disclosures. Prorations, okay? Talk to the attorney that your client's going to use. I recommend that you contact Rivers Title and use one of the Rivers attorneys. Frank or Mitch are great, but they will tell you what percentage you want to put in here. Sometimes it's 100%, sometimes it's 105, some people like 110. So talk to the attorney about the tax prorations so that you know what to put in on the contract. This is talking about if there is an association. So if it's a condo or a townhome and there's association fees, you'd fill those out there. This is stating that attorney reviews within 5 days of acceptance. Same for inspections on number 12. Now, if your client or the buyer is looking to waive professional inspections, meaning they're saying, we don't care what this place is like, we know that we want it, we're not going to come back with anything, they can initial here, and they lose the right for that inspection negotiation period. So not something that happens very often. Nothing to be filled in here, so we're going to keep going. All right. So there are not improvements. There is or is not a pending special assessment, okay? Make sure that you talk to your client, your seller, and have that filled out correctly. The buyer might fill it out, but they don't necessarily know. So don't just have your client blindly initial this stuff. Make sure that you go over it with them and explain what these items are, okay? So for instance, there are not improvements to the real estate which are not included in the full determination of the most recent tax assessment. And you would say this means that you haven't made any improvements that are going to change the way the city assesses your taxes, where they're going to charge more, because we would need to let them know about that, okay? Keep scrolling. Now, under 370, the following numbered paragraphs are a part of this contract only if initialed by the parties. So you don't have to initial these if they aren't in use. Dual agency with KL will never be initialed. Do they need to sell their real estate? So do they have a house to sell? If they do, you're going to put in the address. You're going to put whether it has or has not entered into a contract. If it is or is not subject to a mortgage contingency, if it is under contract, if it is or is not subject to a sale contingency, so the buyers of this property need to sell their home, do the buyers of their home also have that? Okay. Contingencies based upon sale or closing of real estate. So this contract is contingent upon buyer having entered into a contract for the sale of buyer's real estate that is in full force and effect as of this date. So this date you would put as a end all date for saying, hey, we want you to sell your house by this time. It needs to be under contract. It needs to close by this time. Okay, so you have under contract and you have close. And the reason you want to do that is because you don't want someone to just put their property on the market and then you're waiting 3 months for their contract to go through, right? You want to give them an ample amount of time. If they are putting their property up for sale, a lot of times you may want to continue to offer the real estate for sale as the seller. So what this is saying is that we're going to continue to market on the MLS saying we will accept showing still. And usually it's a 72-hour kickout clause. And what that means is that if someone brings in an offer that the seller likes more than this offer that's currently signed, they can go to the buyer and say, hey, we have a better offer. You have 72 hours to drop your contingencies, or we're going to move forward with them. So if they have sale contingencies, they're going to have to drop them in order to get this particular house, potentially. Okay. If you need to cancel a prior contract before entering into this contract, you'd mark here. If you're doing a home warranty, here. If the place is on well, you're going to need a well or sanitary system inspection, so go ahead and get that marked. Wood destroying infestation, a lot of times FHA loans require this, but make sure. Or if you had an inspection and the inspector said, hey, it's possible that this is going on, definitely get this done. Possession after closing means that you're basically going to rent the property out as the seller and stay there for an additional amount of time. Maybe you need an additional 2 weeks before you can move out, but these buyers wanted to close. So you're going to pay them rent for those 2 weeks, and that's where this is negotiated and written in. As is condition. Okay, makes sense. If it's as is, go ahead and mark it. Specified party approval. So that could be maybe there's an LLC and there's someone specific that has to sign rather than just anyone on the LLC. Okay, so they should let you know that. Miscellaneous provision, so if it's a short sale, if it's a 4-unit or fewer multi-unit, tax deferred exchange, vacant land, new construction, things of that nature. Then we have our last page, which has our signatures, has all the information about us and our companies, as well as the attorneys and the loan company for the buyer side. So just make sure that you get that all filled out. And with that, I will go ahead and ask if anybody has any specific questions about the 7.0.